entire management team, as well, of course, to the reporters and the staff of the venerated newspaper sponsoring this conference. It's always a pleasure to address the Jerusalem Post Diplomatic Conference. And it's an honor to follow my friend General Amir Eshel, and appear with all the other distinguished speakers, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, who have been part of the conference. An independent and free press is one of the essential foundations of any democracy. That's clearly demonstrated by the media environment here in Israel, as in the United States, and that shared commitment to the freedom of the press, which is really a sacred value the Jerusalem Post has promoted for more than 80 years, is one of the undergirding strengths of our free and open and democratic society. So again, congratulations to the Jerusalem Post on your fine work day in, day out. The bulk of my remarks will be on U.S.-Israel relations, but first let me address the tragic and ghastly events in Paris over the weekend. This is a series of terrorist strikes that President Obama aptly called an attack on all of humanity and on the universal values that we share. France is the United States' oldest ally, and our unique relationship with the French Republic has never wavered. France was at our side during one of our darkest days, September 11th, 2001, and the United States stands at France's side today. Speaking in Paris yesterday, Secretary of State Kerry said, "We must do what is in our power, and that begins with a sense of fierce solidarity." He continued that it continues with a vow that we will never be intimidated by terrorists, and with a promise that we will never allow these murderers to achieve their violent aims. As I told my colleague, French Ambassador Patrick Massonev, who addressed this conference earlier, I told him yesterday, we offer our condolences to the French people and to the family of those murdered, but we offer more. We offer a sacred commitment to continue the fight to its conclusion, shouldering our share of the burden in combating this scourge to ensure that together we prevail over evil and terror. ISIL, or Daesh, may have launched an attack against France, but it really was an attack against the entire free world. And the United States is going to do whatever we can and whatever it takes to help France confront ISIL and bring those behind this attack to justice, and that activity is already underway. As President Obama announced earlier in the week, the United States is now streamlining the process by which we share intelligence and operational military information with France. And even since long before these horrific attacks, France was an active contributing member of the anti-ISIL coalition. Already in this war, we and our coalition partners have conducted over 8,000 airstrikes against ISIL targets, and we've stopped their territorial advance and enabled local allied fighters like the Kurds to take back significant amounts of territory. But we've always understood that this would be a long-term campaign. And that's what President Obama told the coalition. And with France in a leading role, we are now intensifying our military action, targeting ISIL leadership strongholds such as Raqqa, eliminating key terrorists like Jihadi John, and attacking ISIL's financial infrastructure, including a fleet of oil tanker trucks. At the G20 summit earlier this week, the leading nations also committed to intensify the non-military elements of this campaign through strengthened border controls, greater information sharing between us, and renewed efforts to prevent the flow of foreign fighters in and out of Syria and Iraq. Of course, ISIL's successes have been made possible in the environment created by the Syrian civil war, in which the brutal Assad regime has inflicted such immense suffering on the Syrian people, and extremism has found fertile ground to flourish. Our challenge in Syria is to create conditions under which a clear and broadly acceptable and viable alternative to both Assad and ISIL can emerge. And to that end, President Obama has set out three interrelated goals. First, as I've mentioned, 14 months ago, the President committed the United States to the defeat and dismantlement of the terrorist organization ISIL, or Daesh, directing his national security team to develop and implement recommendations for degrading and defeating Daesh rapidly, completely, and permanently. Second, we're intensifying our diplomatic efforts to finally bring an end to the civil war in Syria. And third, we're determined to support our friends in the region to ensure that the instability created by the Syrian crisis does not spread further beyond its borders. Last week, Secretary of State Kerry traveled to Vienna for a meeting of the International Support Group for Syria, the ISGS. And the statement issued by that support group is an important step toward marshaling international support and cooperation in ending the Syrian crisis and achieving a political solution that realizes the goals of the Syrian revolution. This is a continuation and an intensification of our efforts to implement a sound and legitimate policy that achieves a ceasefire, negotiates a political transition, and brings Syrian suffering to an end. Through American leadership and the cooperation of other concerned states, this new international support group for Syria holds out the possibility of breathing new life into our efforts to achieve these goals. Now, Israelis, our close allies, are understandably nervous given the uniquely complex threat environment and their proximity to this multi-sided civil war, which includes no small number of actors who are hostile to Israel. Israel's right to highlight its interest in not allowing anyone in Syria to permit Iran to conduct or sponsor terrorist attacks on Israel across the Golan Heights frontier, or for Iran to expand its provision of sophisticated weapon systems to Hezbollah in Lebanon. And Israel also has to watch the other extremist elements in Syria, such as ISIL and the al-Nusra Front, with a wary eye. And so the United States is going to work to help keep these Israeli interests very much in mind. They're also American interests, quite frankly, as this diplomatic process unfolds. In fact, one paradoxically reassuring byproduct of the current regional turmoil is that it underscores the strategic importance of the U.S.-Israel relationship. This is a bond of two allies with common strategic interests who face an array of dangers that threaten us and our partners and allies. And the strategic alliance is buttressed by our shared democratic values, which struggle to take hold and indeed are under assault throughout this region. That strategic context formed the backdrop of President Obama's productive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu last week in Washington.